I added this into today's class because I think it's critically important for you to know as leaders within this industry. It got me to think about the relationship with agility and a couple of our F words. And all year, we've been talking about how we have to consider restructuring our companies in light of this VUCA world and the rapid pace of change that is occurring. So when we talk about structure, it's physically how we organize our teams, our org chart, but it goes beyond that. It's cultural. It's these processes and patterns and behavior that we create. What we'll study next week and next month, the culture of your organization. And 𝗏𝗪𝗏 did some really interesting research. And one of the takeaways he found was it's really important to give people the ability, the room, the space to do their best work. If we want to be at our best as an organization, we want everyone contributing at their best individually. And this concept reminded me of this famous quote that you see here. And I don't even know if Steve Jobs actually said it, but it's certainly attributed to him. And I love the idea behind it. He says, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. I love that idea. And I think it's one that we should embrace in the construction industry, because as 𝗏𝗪𝗏 says, there's a tension between employee empowerment and operational discipline. What the hell does that mean, Cody? Well, I see it like this. As a leader, you want to empower Susan in accounting. You want to let Mary loose in project management to learn and grow. You know that that's the right thing to do. But there's the tension that pushes back and says, if I turn Susan or Mary loose and they screw up, that's coming back on me as a leader. That's going to negatively reflect on my leadership decision making. So you straddle this fence of fear. And often you revert to the safest route possible, which is, if I keep Susan and Mary under my thumb, I don't really have much to worry about. I'm in control. And so this is where the intersectionality of these three words come into play: freedom and failure and fear. Because really what drives this tension between freedom and failure is what? It's fear, isn't it? And fear, as we all know, is an incredibly powerful motivator, both for the good and for the bad. Now, when I say freedom, I'm referring to the context of giving your employees the ability to act independently on behalf of the organization. And I'm going to try to make the case for why I think this is really important. I think to feel fulfilled in the work that they're doing, they need this freedom. Remember, as a leader in the manpower crisis that many of us are in, we have to build engagement and trust with our key personnel. And one way to do that is to give them this freedom to think and act on behalf of your organization. But one of the challenges for many of us is that we view this as zero sum, a game in which if I give freedom, I lose all control. And it's really not a measure of those extremes. And so what's the problem when we hold on to that control? I think the problem is that there's a tendency for many of us, particularly when the stakes are high, not to delegate, not to provide the freedom, to keep control and ensure your people continue to color within the lines. Now, why is that a problem? It's a problem because if you remember earlier this year when we talked about this new research from 𝗙𝗪𝗪 about motivation, remember, one of the key intrinsic motivators in a knowledge economy is autonomy. And what's another word for autonomy? Another word for autonomy is freedom. Give your people some control. They have an opportunity to strategize and design how they do what they do. And so I believe, and the research supports, one of the reasons we have to think hard about relinquishing some of our control is to drive engagement by giving more freedom, more autonomy. We want employees who are more engaged and more motivated, right? When they are, we will be more profitable. They will be safer. They will be less likely to miss work. We've been through all that data that supports this. And I know how hard this is for some of you. I'm a bit of a control freak myself, but I want you to think about the flip side of this. If you're willing to give the freedom, you're going to increase their autonomy. You're going to increase team cohesiveness and engagement, and you're going to motivate your people to pull the rope in the same direction. And we also know, if we look here at this slide and we think back to Paul Zach's work on how we build trust and the 8 building blocks of organizational trust, we know that yield is critical. Another word for yield is what? Autonomy. Another word for autonomy is what? It's freedom. And so you as a leader have to balance this tension between giving the freedom, the autonomy to your people, and having enough control to feel comfortable. How do you find that balance? Well, it's hard. And to me, I think it's situational. I think it's contextual. It depends on the situation, who you're dealing with, your experience, their experience. But I want to challenge you to be willing to let go a little bit of that control. 𝗙𝗪𝗧 says this: you don't just turn them loose like a kite in the wind. Turn them loose with a framework in which you clearly state your purpose, priorities, and principles in your company. And you co-create this framework with your employees. Something like, listen, to satisfy the customer, you're free to do this. To ensure that we deliver this project on time, you have the freedom to do anything up to this. It's kind of what we'll talk about next foundation, this concept of creating rebel talent, giving individuals the freedom to play within the space that you designate, a freedom that aligns with, again, your purpose, priorities, and principles. And last thing on this article by 𝗙𝗪𝗧, for those of you that think this isn't going to work in the construction industry, look at the research. The research was based on, I think, 2 incredibly diverse companies, very different. Netflix playing in the streaming space and Alaska Airlines. Now, imagine a company in the airline business that's willing to build a structure that's not stifling, that provides freedom. I can't imagine a more structured and critically operated environment than running an airline. So I think there is parallels to our industry. So take a look at this article if you have time.